Okie dokie.
Okie dokie, here we are.
Okie dokie. Yeah, I am super pumped to have you here, Tammy. So we'll let folks get situated here, kind of trickling in here before we get started. But do you have any travel coming up at all?
Yeah, a week from Monday, 10 days from today, we're going to Cabo, my family and I.
Amazing.
Can't wait. Can't wait to get out there. Just need a break, and over Thanksgiving is perfect because you don't have to check your email as much.
Yeah.
You can really relax.
Are you guys on, is LaunchDarkly on a calendar year or a fiscal year?
No, we're 1 month offset. So Salesforce, January 31st is the end of our fiscal year.
Wonderful. Yes, us too. Because
Yeah,
that's the next thing is like, will Christmas through New Year's be a mad dash of insanity, or will you actually be able to like hang out with the family at all? And
the whole thing shuts down. And don't you love that fiscal year, Pete? I mean, you guys
my gosh. Yeah. Well, I mean, like, yes. I mean, we don't have as nearly as large ASP as your team, but like for whatever reason, we still have like some pretty substantially backloaded quarters. I need to get, probably because our sales leader, this guy, needs to get his act together better on driving linearity on the team. But having that like huge lump at the end of the calendar year versus like on January is it's like stress on stress on stress. So
yeah,
yes,
I got a tip for you there.
Please,
Okay, so
please, coach.
Yeah, so about 2 quarters ago, I decided that the end of the quarter was, and I picked it. So this quarter, the end of the quarter is January 31st. So all of my reps get their bonuses, but only if they make their number by January 31st or 21st. Sorry.
21st. Wow. Yes. Okay.
One of the quarter up. So basically, it means that no deals in Salesforce can have a close date of January 31st. And if you don't make you have until January 21st to make your number in order to get your quarterly bonus.
Wow.
And it's really effective.
And lo and behold, a bunch of those deals have been showing up earlier. Weird.
And they show up earlier. Now last quarter, we had like 6 deals slip. But you know what? I think if the reps would have been positioning in October 31st close? Yeah. October 31st close, that they all would have slipped into November. The deals that we said slipped actually slipped to the last week of the quarter, not to a new quarter.
Yeah. Got it. Yes. It's the kind of like cat and mouse game associated with like dealing with sandbagging and urgency and rep incentivizing. Never a dull moment, but that's why that's why enterprise sales leaders make the big bucks. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started here. I'm really excited to have a absolutely fantastic guest here today. We'll get into a little bit more here in a second here, but this is another episode, if you will, of Modern Sales Power Hour. I'm Pete Kazanjy, and just for folks that kind of familiarize themselves with Goldcast, this is our event platform right here. It makes for a lot of really great interactivity, which is the whole point of this, because we have an illustrious sales leader here to kind of drop knowledge and answer your questions live. In the side panel, there's a Q&A thing. See, I'm pointing at it right now through my camera. There's a Q&A panel over there. You can submit questions via text there or video questions. Leverage that, because the whole idea here is that we have this wonderful wealth of knowledge in the form of Tammy Sexton, enterprise sales leader at LaunchDarkly here. And I know a couple things, but really Tammy's the show here today. And so this is all about answering questions there. For folks who are not familiar, maybe joining us for the first time, Power Hour is a production of Modern Sales. MSP, Modern Sales Pros, MSP is the world's largest revenue leadership community for folks in sales management, sales and revenue operations, sales development, and related disciplines. The whole mission of the community is to create an environment for our 25,000 members to answer the questions that they would struggle to answer on their own, and kind of help them see around corners. And that's literally what we're doing today. Is like, hey, I have this question around, champion development, or like, decision criteria influence or whatever. Hey, guess what? We could get that answered right here by an expert there. So we do, aside from just this, MSP does a bunch of really great other events as well. We do virtual experiences. We have a robust online forum, and also we do really great offline events in the form of our salons. So just kind of a couple things before we get started here. So this is a unique format. It's not like a couple talking heads here, just kind of opining on whatever. Rather, what we're doing here is we're really trying to dig into specific tactical questions that and problems that people have that Tammy and myself can kind of help you solve. Some people have submitted questions ahead of time, and we'll get into that. But the whole idea here is for us to like get into the nitty gritty of your problems, and help answer those questions. And so kind of without any further ado, what I'd love to do is have Tammy introduce herself. I kind of noted earlier, she's an enterprise sales leader at LaunchDarkly, but Tammy, you have a storied sales leadership career. Maybe you can give folks a little bit of rundown of kind of what that's been over the last like few roles.
Sure. So I started out at PTC, as you probably pointed out earlier, and spent some time at EMC, and then thought I really actually like the startup world. So I've been with Sumo Logic, PagerDuty right before they went public, Sumo before they went public, and now LaunchDarkly. Current title is actually VP of North America, and I actually inherited the corporate sales group. So
fun.
Group. Yep. So I'll get to try my hand at managing the high velocity sales next year, which is gonna be fun.
Oh, wow. That's, wow, that will be exciting because it's like keeping two languages in your brain at the same time, because like what are the round parameters of like the ASP and deal cycle on the end side versus commercial side? I imagine they're probably pretty substantially different there.
They are. Yeah. So we view a corporate sales account as less than 1,000 employees on LinkedIn. So and their ASP is about 18,000. The ASP in the enterprise space is about 60, and then our strat accounts, which is like the larger, the IBM and Microsofts of the world, they can go to be 7 figures easily. So this will be a whole different area I can kind of add to my expertise. I'm really looking forward to it.
That'll be really interesting. We'll have to have you back to talk about that like in 6 months, because I know I was having this like text message argument with one of our board members last night, as one does, right? About MedPick applicability to down market sales motions, and I was advancing the claim that it's something that's more like enterprise centric, and he's like, "No, you're full of crap. Like it's something. It's like buyer. It's all about buyer centricity." And that can be applied in, that can be applied at a 10K or a 20K transaction, as long as there's, a bunch of different criteria going on. And I was like, oh, okay, well, and now you're going to be applying that there. So actually, one of the questions that somebody brought up earlier, and like we can talk about this, is like, what is the sales methodology that you guys have deployed there at LaunchDarkly, and then how have you gone about kind of deploying that?
Sure. So, as a former PTC employee, obviously it's MedPick. I'm a big John McMahon fan. If you know who John is, he was my first sales leader. So when he wrote the qualified sales leader, it's like my Bible. I keep it with me.
It's a great book.
I actually asked him to come on one of my team calls. This is when the book first came out. In fact, he texted me and he's like, "Will you read this and put some comments if you like it on LinkedIn?" And I'm like, "Well, sure. For you, anything." And MedPick is to me by far the most superior sales methodology out there for enterprise and strat. And we'll see about corporate. I don't know what to say about that yet.
How do you guys have that like deployed right now? Like this, because I think a lot of people hear like Medic or MedPick or what have you, and like they know about these notions by like they know about them like they're cognizant of them, but they don't necessarily know how to reduce it to practice. Like, how do you guys have various fields on the opportunity? Are you doing it in some sort of other solution where you're making sure that people are authenticating their MedPick criteria? How do you guys like tactically do that?
Yeah, it's ironic you should bring that up. I'm actually in a little bit of we're in transition right now. So we put all the fields in Salesforce. The problem with putting the fields in Salesforce is you go like economic buyer, and the rep puts in, Joe Smith, and that doesn't really tell me anything. If you look at what the economic buyer, the reason that's part of MedPick isn't do you know who the economic buyer is have you been in front of the economic buyer? Has the economic buyer said they were going to buy? Have they committed to your timeline? So I'm actually in the process of trying to work right now with our Salesforce admins to not just have like economic buyer blank, but actually have a sliding scale saying pick one of these. Like I know, so 0 points means you don't even know who EB is. 1 is you know who EB is, but have never met with them. Maybe a 3 is you've met with the economic buyer. And a 5 is like you've met with EB, they confirmed they're going to buy, they confirmed timeline, and you have a follow-up meeting. And then everything in MedPick will actually be weighted for a final MedPick score. So you can actually, MedPick is not about a letter and then a blank, economic buyer blank. It's not what it is.
Yeah, it's about like weighting the probability and identifying risk and like gaps. And I love the fact that you have that book sitting right there and having a unified way by which to discuss deals, as opposed to just like, yeah, it's going great, right? Like, here, let me tell you a story about it, right? Like, which obviously reps are really good at telling stories. So you're gonna do weighting on each of the MedPick fields. What would be some of the other, like, in the case of, I was gonna say, I'm like, oh, this is making my mind spin. Like, what would be the different weightings of like metric?
Like for example, metric. 0 being I don't know, right? Maybe you get a 3 if you've got some idea. Like I know that this company wants to go from 2 releases a month to 5 releases a week. They want to go from twice a month to daily, right? That might be a 3. You get a 5 if you say that going from 2 releases a month to releasing daily is going to have this impact on their business. They believe that they can double the rate of innovation if they go from this to this. That's a full metric. And like for like champion, like I have a champion spreadsheet that all the reps have to fill out, and it has things on it like, do you have their phone number? Have you text them? Can you? I think we talked about this last time, right? Have you swore? Because if they swear and you swear, it's like a whole little level of like, ooh, we're getting chummy now, right?
But we're buddies,
We're buddies. And then if you're buddies, you can ask them questions like, if you install our product and it's successful, what does that mean for you? Do you get a promotion? What happens? So champion in Salesforce for us right now, it's a blank, right? But what I want it to be coming, I'm working with sales ops, is put your champion score here. And depending upon your champion score, you get all 20 points for that category, because all the categories are not worth the same amount, right? Champions worth a lot more than, and then, it gives you an overall score, which I think can actually play into our forecasting as well. We can use that score to say the health of the deal is this.
Definitely. That's a really fascinating thing, because I think one of the things that's kind of funny with these sales methodologies, like they all kind of have their own clever little acronym, which is great because you want to be able to remember them. But the problem is that like every like word kind of feels the same weight because it's like part of an acronym or what have you. But as you point out, like you could know the metric, you could know all these different things, the decision criteria, and if you don't have a champion, you're still kind of hosed, right? So when you think about like the different kind of components of MedPick there, what are the top 3 most important criteria? That, like, obviously champion is worth like 20 in your estimation here. What would be the other ones that are like super powered?
Pain and EB.
Yep.
And I would have to say either between EB or decision criteria. Like John says in his book, control the decision criteria, control the deal. If you feel like the decision criteria is then being like leaning towards something else that isn't, something that's a highlight of your product, but versus like a competitive product, you've lost control of your deal. Yep.
Got it. Well, so let's talk about economic buyers, because I think one of the things that reps oftentimes will like screw up is like, and actually we'll get to Louis' question here in a second, but like they'll talk about like, oh yeah, the DM, and it's like, whoa, like what genre what genre of decision maker are we talking about here? Are we talking about like an influencer? Are we talking about a business user? Or are we talking about an economic buyer? And I think John does a really good job in the book talking about like a very crisp definition of the economic buyer, which I'm going to try to not screw up, but I think essentially what it is, it's the person who has the power to disperse discretionary funds.
That's
Right?
100% correct. The economic buyer
Yeah.
has use of discretionary funds.
Yeah, exactly. And so what's I think the thing that kind of like addles rep brains, like I had this recently in one of our deals where the rep was like, oh yeah, the SVP of sales is like totally in, like, I've gotten a verbal commitment from him on this timeline right here. But then it actually turned out that even though the SVP of sales had this like highfalutin title, that he was not the economic buyer, because the person who actually like went through NetSuite and said yes, okay, authorize the PO or whatever, was this like business operations person over here, and it actually elongated the deal cycle by like 30 days. It was super annoying, but and the rep was like, I don't get it. And it's like, so I think that one of the things that we were kind of noting that has been on your radar recently is like, how do you get in front of the economic buyer early? And then how do you persist a relationship with them throughout the arc of the deal? So what are you like, how are you coaching your reps to do that?
So obviously, as your champion score goes up, you have the right then, when your champion score is high enough, to ask the champion to introduce your boss or your whoever you want, right, to the economic buyer. It's not always going to be something that they're going to be like, it all depends upon how strong your champion is and how much they want your product, right? But then I also encourage my reps, like there's different ways. Like we have a 2-week POV here, 2-week trial. And we have customers who say, I need a month trial. Great. You can have a month trial, but that's going to require me to get my executives in front of your executives, because we want to make sure that any investment in time that we make in you, we have the hope of doing business at the end. And then as a rep, you can look at your champion and just say, I don't have control over this. Like, I just can't get it done. Like, don't make it you asking them, make it like this is, or customers want, an unreasonable IP, limitation of liability, right? Great. We're going to meet with, and in a perfect world, you're meeting with the economic buyer before your POV, and you're walking with your executives and you're starting with those pain slides. Hey, Mr. EB, this is what I heard from members of your team, and this is how it's affecting your business. Would you agree with that? To get them talking before your executives talk to EB, because it's really important that they start with their pain. There's 100 ways to get to EB. Anytime a customer asks us for anything, it's a reason to ask for something in exchange.
It's like the trade, right? Because I think this is the challenge that reps will run into, especially when they're talking, when they're not like having a conversation at the, what does John call it? The pain above the noise or something like that? I forget what it is.
Pain above the noise. That's when you're talking to the business level. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Because like there's like product level, like, hey, I've got, like, use LaunchDarkly as an example. Like, oh man, our existing release management is like janky or whatever, and it's like it's kind of a pain in my butt. And we're talking about like features and kind of like practitioner pain and what have you, which is great, right? Like obviously that has to exist, but like it's kind of hard to talk that to a CFO or to a VP of engineering or a CIO or what have you. And so I think the things that reps oftentimes struggle with is like, how do I, like, I'm down here, how do I even like facilitate that conversation? Like, yes, I agree I should get in front of the economic buyer earlier, but how do I precipitate that? One thing is like, oh, if they have an ask for us, but what about in a scenario where like they don't have an ask for us, where we can't do a trade? Are there certain methods that you coach your reps on, and like getting to that economic buyer and like up leveling that conversation earlier and earlier and earlier?
Yeah. Excuse me. To me, it's really about building your champion.
Okay.
And you know what? Once you get your champion to the point of what would it be like for your life if you implemented my product, right? And the hope is the champion's like, I love it. I want it. You know what? Here's an effective way to get it done. Let me get my CTO in front of your CTO, so that relation. So it's not, you're not asking your champion to have you meet with EB. You're saying, let me get my CTO. We can give you some, roadmap discussion about LaunchDarkly, whatever your product is. And you know what? If they really are your champion and they really do want your product, they have no reason. That's a great test. And if they fail, and if they're like, nope, can't do that, that person's too busy, it just goes to show you that you probably shouldn't have it on commit, right?
Right. It's like and this is why, qualification is not a one-step process, right? It's like, it's not always be closing, it's always be qualifying, right? And so in that case, it's like, cool, are you excited about this? And I'm going to champion test you. Yeah, this would be really transformative to me. Wonderful. Well, like, I sell a lot of LaunchDarkly, and I can tell you exactly how it gets done. The next step here is for us to get in front of your economic buyer. And the way we're going to do that is not me, this enterprise sales rep or whatever, but what we're going to do is we're going to have a carrot, which is like, hey, we're going to get this done for you, Mr. Customer, because you want to get this done, but we're going to give you this nice little carrot, which is roadmap or some sort of like executive relationship. That's really fascinating though, because like you guys only have one CTO, right? Or one VP or whatever. So like, how do you yeah, that's really fascinating. Like, how do you guard that resource and make sure that it's not being like pissed away willy-nilly here or there?
You know John, right? Kodomo?
I do. Yeah, and well, I'm more friendly with Edith, but yeah, like because presumably he's spending time with like the engineering team or what have you, right? I mean, it's an amazing move, right? Like, don't you want to move? Don't you want to have executive pairing and like meet with the CTI? Oh well, like yes, I would, right? But like it's like not cost free.
John's been phenomenal, and what I ask of John and Edith is just to give the reps a couple time slots every month that they know they can book these. And if they need something outside of it, like John and Edith both have been amazing with their time. I couldn't be more happy with the way they do make themselves available. With that being said, I like to, some people like to police that by deal size. So for example, your deal size must be over 100K if you want to access the executives. I actually like to police things, and this is across the board a little bit differently. I like to look at total addressable market. So if it's IBM and we've got a deal for 25K, I'm accessing John, I don't care what, right? But
no problem. This is just one very small bite of the pie, and the pie is this big.
Yes. And then sometimes we have a deal for 150K at some very small company. And we know after that first deal, they're maxed out. Like they're not going to buy anything more unless we come out with a totally different product. So is that a good use of John's time, or is the IBM deal for 25 grand a good use of John's time?
Those are, man, Tammy, these are like great gems. So I think the like some takeaways there is like, one, do the exec pairing, right? Use it as that carrot to get in front of EB, right? And then the way to facilitate that and actually make sure that happens is have those slots. One of the things that we talk about in my sales organizations, because I'm nuts, is calendar is destiny. And so in this case, it's like, hey, let's calendar slots that are recurring, just sits there. And like, I'm like, I think I want to start doing this for me, right? Where it's just like, here's a 2-hour block, like, a couple times a month, or maybe it's like once a week or whatever, where it's a 2-hour block and it's like, executive pairing time, right, for reps. And like, if it doesn't get used, congratulations, you just got a bunch of time back. You can do email, or you can like do whatever else. You can hop on the Peloton.
Usually not a good sign when it doesn't get used.
Oh, that's yeah, exactly. Right. You can hop on. Right. You can do email. The first email you're going to do is you're going to send it to your sales leader and be like, "Hey, why did this get used?" That's a very good point.
And when you're sitting there with a customer, you got your champion, and they're like, "Yeah, I think I would like to set that up." You can say, "How about you have visibility into your CTO's calendar? Would this work? Should I just send out an invite for this time?" And just ask them, because you know what, you want to strike while the iron's hot. And if you have their buy-in, don't rely on email and going back and forth with someone's admin if you don't have to. Sometimes you can't get out of it.
Yeah, why don't you just go ahead and bring up your calendar there? I imagine you probably see his calendar, right? Yeah. How's I'm looking at my my CTO's calendar right now. Like, let's get this out. Yeah, I love that. What so I think on it's funny, we're talking about CTOs who are like, maybe CTOs being involved in the deal cycle, which is maybe like the most grandiose example of like maybe a sales engineer here. But I know one thing that's really like the case with LaunchDarkly. We don't have this problem, but I know a lot of the people who are listening do, is like, you guys have a really technical sale, right? Like the modern continuous integration, like stack is like very, very involved, and like you have all these these organizations have like super hairy service oriented architectures and what have you. Like what are some of the things that you do in order to drive like better, like your AEs and your SEs playing nicely together, whether it's like resource utilization, making sure the SE's time is being used appropriately, making sure that the AEs are putting the correct stuff on the SEs and not having them do stuff that the AEs should be doing. How do you guys approach that?
So we went through an exercise in Q3 with a company to define roles and responsibilities. And
Right.
we're actually we're in the midst of changing our company from opportunity management to account management. And what I mean by that is, if I've got IBM, a $25,000 deal, right? In the past, the rep would close the deal, they'd give it to customer success and say, call me if there's an upgrade, right? But that's really not the best. That's not, you really want to have that rep and the SC continue to be engaged. From a technical perspective, what we have going for us, and I think that most companies do, is like, our product is really technical, but it really isn't. Like, I can actually demo. I've got my own, I can demo LaunchDarkly myself. So if I'm sitting on an airplane and I happen to be sitting next to the CTO or whatever, I can, if he goes, what's LaunchDarkly? Or she goes, I'm like, let me show you. And it's, I think that my best reps actually are technical enough to be able to understand what LaunchDarkly is, but I think the best reps, and this goes for anybody across any industry, is taking something really technical and making it so a 5-year-old can understand what they do. Because you know what, when that proposal goes up for final signature at whatever account you're selling to, the CFO doesn't know anything about feature flags. But what they do know is we've got to out innovate our competitors. So if you can take that very complex thing and break it down. And then sometimes I think it's actually to a sales rep's advantage that they're not that technical. Like sometimes on a discovery call, some sales reps invite their SEs to a discovery call, some go solo. I really don't have a preference either way. But one thing I do know is on that discovery call, making sure that the focus is the customer and the customer's pain and not a selling event is really, really important. So if the customer asks a question and it is technical, the reps they make sure that the SE answers the question, but the goal of the SE is to answer it short, sweet, and then get back to the customer's pain. And it's not to continue on with LaunchDarkly.
Right. Like, did that answer that question? Yes, it did. Okay, great. Let's get back to how you want to transform your delivery schedule and move to, continuous integration as opposed to a waterfall delivery or whatever. Blah, 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 blah.
Or that's a great question. It actually would be easier for me to show that in a demo. Do you mind if we table that? And I'll make sure to bring it up. Great. Move on. Let's talk about your pain, and let's talk about Canary Launch. Let's talk about continuous delivery and test and production and blah, blah, blah.
So I think my takeaway from that is like, just make sure that SEs don't like, and this isn't like I'm not like talking crap here or whatever, like make sure that they don't take a discovery conversation and turn it into like a technical conversation. And so I think that's like a roles and responsibility thing where it's like, hey, look, I'm driving the business conversation here. I will like lateral things to you, execute it, and then pop it back to me. Where do the SEs then get involved and deployed in a deeper fashion in the POVs?
Well, obviously, the demo. But the goal of the demo is for the rep to start with the pain slides that they created as a result of the discovery call, right? Here's your current state.
This is what I heard.
Here's the future state. Here's the benefits. And then the SE, it's a perfect segue for the SE to say, here are the technical requirements that you need to meet your future state. And then, now let me start talking about LaunchDarkly. Of course, you start with the pain slides, the rep does the pitch, then the SE gets right into the meat and potatoes of the whole, platform.
Do you guys, is that how you guys do that? Because we have something similar where we have the most obnoxious name for this slide template. We call it a hot pocket. It's totally ridiculous. That's our internal term. But we have this like hot pocket template of like, it's like 8 slides or whatever. And the very first slide is pain points and kind of like required capabilities that like kind of tie together there. Is that, and this is like a Google slide that like our reps fork off. We're probably going to start using some like dedicated mutual plan software for this. One of my reps is like goofing around with that and kind of like running with that evaluation. is that what you guys do too? Is you just have like a slide template or whatever, and then the reps are supposed to like fill that out in order to guide the conversation?
From a pain side's perspective?
Yeah.
We're actually going through, as I told you, I mean, LaunchDarkly is really transitioning like to big, like real enterprise selling, real strat selling. It's taken a while, right? We're actually going, we're doing some consulting in Q1 around the, I don't know if you've heard of command of the message, but essentially that's what we're doing in Q1. So we'll have templates right now. The pain slides the reps are presenting are all they all have their own version.
I see.
It's not where it needs to be, but it's going to be soon.
Yeah, but they're doing it. It's maybe not harmonized, but at least someone's doing it. And if they're not doing it, Tammy roasts them, right? And so in the future it'll be more harmonized. That makes sense. Well, so we were talking about like so on MedPick stuff. We talked about EB and kind of like the importance of that. The other thing too, though, is like obviously LaunchDarkly is like way out ahead of the market. But there's kind of more entrants there, and so presumably, especially as you're getting into these much larger organizations, like they're probably pretty thoughtful hires. It's not like they're just doing it on a lark or whatever. Like they're doing an actual RFP or RFP light or whatever. Like they're doing a purchase process, and so when you think about kind of influencing decision criteria and that, how are you coaching your reps to do that and make sure that like the RFP or the decision criteria points directly at LaunchDarkly?
Yeah. Yes. And Pete, that is the importance of AE outbound, right? Like every salesperson in the world would love to sit back and say, you know what, marketing, you just give me all the leads and I'll work them.
Right.
But the best sales reps get in early before that RFP, and they're talking to customers about their testing and their release process and the effect on and really good salespeople through a series of questions can make the unique differentiators about their product important to their customer and make it seem like it's the customer's idea. So, Mr. Customer, tell me about, in our case, tell me about technical debt. How's your product? We've got this debt. So a feature flag management system that helps you deal with technical debt would be important to you, huh? See, I just said, why don't you make this important? But then the customer goes, yep. And then when you sit in front of the economic buyer before the POV, you're like, this is important because my product has a particular, LaunchDarkly has a particular like way of getting rid of technical debt, which is something that's a differentiator for our product. But like, unless you can really make that important to your customer through a series of questions, that's why it's really important to be first in the door. And I love inbound leads because they convert at a very high rate. But what we normally see is reps reach out. There's a little bit of interest. Customer says, close not now. Fine. 6 months later, your champion's emailing you saying, do you have a list of decision criteria I can put in the RFP? Sure, let me write that for you. Here you go. And all of a sudden, you've locked out all your competitors. And if you wait for marketing to let that deal drive to you, the customers usually have done all their research in advance. They've already made up their mind about what's important to them, rather than you having the conversation about things where you can plant questions and get them thinking and then throw it all back at them. Here's what you thought was important. Oh, and these 4 things are important too, huh? Yep. Okay. Only we can do those 4 things.
That is interesting. So, and I think, is that something that you guys do in the sales organization, or is that something that product marketing has kind of helped out with, where it's like, hey, look, these are the key differentiators as compared to, I'm trying to remember the competitors that LaunchDarkly has, like Switch or whatever. It's like, or Optimizely has like a little, like it's like new or whatever. And so do your reps kind of like know what the key differentiators are, such that they can then be like, cool, let's like ask probing questions that like point directly to those differentiators?
Mixed.
Yeah, we would like them to. Yeah,
that's something that we're working with force management on in Q1 is really honing in on what are the key 5 to 7 things that we know that we do better than our competitors.
Yeah. then that's so yeah the way that, so as somebody who used to be a product marketer myself, the way that I'm just like religious about like plowing things back into disco questions and just making sure that the discovery questions, the evergreen disco question list is like is always kind of like up to date, tip of the branch, right? And so like either as like other markets, as like movements happen in the market, and maybe like somebody gets acquired, and then like usually that's kind of like the death knell for innovation there. Or alternatively, you ship more features that actually make something like more different. Like a good example of this would be that we recently integrated with like Gong, right? Atrium organizations can visualize and goal on and set alerts on a bunch of their Gong data in Atrium. And so previously we didn't really have a disco question around like how you do conversational intelligence or whatever, but now we add one which is like, hey, how are you guys doing conversation intelligence right now? Oh, we use Chorus. Oh, we use Gong. Wonderful. Like, so are people actually like listening to those calls, or did you find that like it's kind of one of those things that you wish you had more time to do, and but you don't get around to it? Oh yeah, no one ever listens to it, but like we'd love to understand how people are tracking on these behaviors over time. Okay, cool. Well, we'll get back to that, right? And so like making sure that those trap questions are in there in disco, but even as like new stuff ships, getting it back into the disco questions.
Yep. How do you update? In fact, we use Gong, or we use Chorus.
Yep.
And we actually just put a tracker together that in the name of the sentence that the rep has to say is what was the impact to your business? So when they talk about shipping stuff that doesn't work, the rep's supposed to say, and then across a quarter, I'm going to be looking. And the best thing about it is on Monday, I've got an all employees call, and I'm going to let everybody know, like at the end of the quarter, you should be a part of this graph. If your name isn't on the graph, it means you haven't asked that question. We have bigger problems to deal with. And you know what? Just like when I was doing my champion building, and one of the questions on there is like, do you know their kid's name, their dog's name? Now, when any dog barks in the background, my reps automatically are like, what's your dog's name? And now they kind of laugh, but you know what? It encouraged them to do something different that they wouldn't have done.
You habituated to it by like continuing to roast them on it and make sure that it's well, I guess that this is very PTC, very force management, like the notion of mantras, right? Like, because like making sure that you're always like, it's funny, each of our departments has their own mantras, because like I'm terrible. So what I do is I infuse this stuff in different parts of our organization. So we have our SDR mantras, we have our AE mantras, we have our CS mantras as well. Hasn't gotten into the engineering organization quite yet. We'll see. Maybe I'll like infect them as well. But what ends up happening is like you show the data, or you set an expectation. Hey, the reason why we're doing this, like we're supposed to be talking about impact. We're going to instrument that through, through Chorus, or we're going to and then we'll get you that integration here in the coming quarters. But like, and then we can visualize it in Atrium, and then you habituate it and make sure that people are talking about it in team meeting.
You got to publish it once in a while, right? Because no one wants to be on the bottom of the graph.
Yeah, if you just say it in team meeting and then like you never bring the graph up again, or you never habituate and you don't actually talk the mantra, then it's kind of like in one ear out. Like it's actually in one ear and out the other. And then moreover, if you don't ever like harp on the program and like actually see a program through fruition, then you end up training your reps where it's just like, oh yeah, like whatever Pete says, like that's just flavor of the week. Like that's not going to happen, right?
Yeah, you gotta pick one thing and stick to it for a while.
Right, and I think that's what you said earlier, is that previous the previous kind of coaching emphasis or like team-wide coaching emphasis was all around champion development, right? And then now you're moving towards EB and decision criteria. How I actually maybe you could talk about this a little bit, is like, because so much of what we were talked about with respect to EB access and then decision criteria influence, I guess. The way that you do both of those things is by having a strong champion. So that's kind of like the high order bid. It's the right. So what are some of the ways that you kind of coach champion development for your teams? Obviously there's knowing the dog's name, but like what else?
Well, I mean, I have a whole list of questions, but mostly it's about you build that first kind of relationship as a contact, right? They respond to your emails, right? Your second part of that is more like them coordinating meetings. And after you've done all the pleasantries, you got their cell phone, whatever, there's literally a list of questions, and I have a champion call score sheet, and it's asking them things like, if the champion, if our product succeeds and you go from 2 releases a month to 1 release a day, what happens to you? And I think it's really, the reps used to use it in a very reactive way. So they knew that they were doing a med pick review. They knew that I was going to be on the med pick review. They knew I was going to ask their champion score. And so they went and calculated it. And that was a good first step. But what I wanted them to do, and now they're doing more so, is, I've got a meeting with, Pete on Thursday. I'm going to go to my Pete champion score, and I'm going to say, you know what? Here's 20 points I can pick up. I'm going to find out what Pete's dog's name is, joke, right? But I'm going to ask Pete these hard questions. Whatever. I'm going to ask Pete for that EB meeting. I'm going to ask Pete if I can help him prepare the internal slides. I'm going to ask Pete to participate in a BVA, a business value assessment, with a right to see if he will. But you got to do all that base stuff before you can ask those second level questions. You have to earn the right to ask EB to take you to or your champion to actually take you to the EB. So moving forward, it's about taking the champion score sheet and looking at all the stuff that is still a no on there and picking
gap analysis.
Yeah, use it proactively to figure out, how am I going to get a champion score of 70? Don't surprise yourself by going, oh shit, I got a good champion score. It's not how it's supposed to be used.
Right. It doesn't just happen. It happens through good pre-call planning and saying, hey, what are the things that are missing? It's fascinating because it's almost like what you want to do is it's like MedPick is on the op, but then you want to be able to do this on the contact and make sure that you're checking these things off, but not in a willy-nilly sort of fashion. Think about hey, from a pre-call planning standpoint, what am I trying to achieve here? What is my ideal exit from this conversation? What are we trying to achieve here? But then breaking it down granularly. There is what's the thing that we're trying to do on the deal, right? And kind of absent MedPick things or whatever. But then it's almost kind of open that up, and then you have all these contact criteria that are that are missing or absent or whatever, and then you set your intention in order to do that. That's still all in Google in a Google sheet, right, Tammy? Your reps are working out of that.
Yep. I can send you a copy of it, anonymized. It starts with influence and authority. Does your champion have influence? Do they have authority? And then here's the basic. Have they returned your emails just one-on-one, or is there always people copied on them? And then it gets to the second level, and then the third level, which is the bottom, which is the real champion building. I shouldn't call it champion. It's kind of a champion score sheet, but it really should be like a champion plan.
Yeah, literally that's what I was thinking. I was it's an account plan, but for human.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, totally. There's a really good question here from Kathy around, what are some successful ways for planting decision criteria to differentiate? I think we kind of talked about it a little bit earlier, but what are some really tactical ways to plant those decision criteria to make sure that that's happening?
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about it, but to me, it's about asking the right questions and guiding the conversation by asking questions. But it's almost like your customer doesn't even know that you're doing it. You're making it their idea, but they don't even realize. So
totally.
So if you ask about technical debt, right, and they go, we have some. What's the impact been? Right? How do you think a feature flag management system is going to add to that technical debt in the future? What do you think your technical debt's going to look like in 2 years if you're not able to automate the removal of flags? Until all of a sudden they went from, I don't really care about removal of the flags, to, holy shit, if I don't remove those flags, I'm going to have real messed up ton of code in the future. It's going to suck. And so all of a sudden it becomes their idea to automate the removal of flags. And you're so when you put up the list of here's the technical requirements to meet your desired state, that's on there, and they're yep. And you remind them of that every time you meet with them again.
Right. Because you brought them, you led them to it. I think, I took screenshots of this or pictures with my iPhone while I was reading the Qualified Sales Leader, the section where he talks about the insurance salesman doing savage disco with him, where it's just
what happens if you get boxed up, John?
What happens if exactly boxed up? Yeah, box up. Well, I'm not going to say die, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And then like it's such for anyone who hasn't read The Qualified Sales Leader, like literally that just like that little section right there
More
is
your dog. What do you call them? Your dog marks. I forget what these
yeah,
are. I think has
amazing.
more. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, it's so great. And I think one of the things that's really that reps oftentimes struggle with though is going like 4 or 5 questions deep on disco on a single topic, because what
Mhm.
they'll do is they kind of treat it like a checkbox, right? Like, oh, like how are you doing feature flagging right now? Okay, great. How are you doing how are you doing continuous integration? How are you like what's your build system or whatever, versus like when they get a little piece of pain, asking the next and then the next and then the next and then the
What's the
next.
impact to
And
your business?
yeah, and I feel that a lot of that is oftentimes because like reps are nervous and they're not
They're not
like
actively listening.
yeah, totally. But like oftentimes it's because they're like nervous and they're like not secure in their skin, if
Mhm.
you will. And obviously, like this is where enterprise reps highly differentiate as compared to kind of like junior, SMB or like mid-market reps, where they're comfortable having like a real like a serious business conversation, and not like they're comfortable with silence. They're comfortable asking these kind of these like pointed questions, like, yeah, what happens if you get boxed up, right?
Yeah. Yep. Now
And
you got a guy that all he was worried about, John McMahon, on that day was his rep from Chicago who's going to be calling him on a deal update, and all of a sudden you shifted his attention span to what if I get boxed up? What happens to my wife? What happens to my kids? He came on one of my team calls and I asked him, I'm like, so John, did you buy the insurance? And he skirted the answer. He wouldn't tell me yes or no.
anyway, yeah, it's so and so I wonder how like this is one of the things that I struggle with. Kind of the joke I like to say is like, how do you install backbone? Like, how do you install backbone into reps? 'Cause, and I don't like I think the answer to that is like lots of repetitions and lots of like trial and error and what have you. How do you have kind of approaches to like help them get comfortable around like persisting and going next, 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 next?
Well, so the first strategy there would be the chorus tracker that we're doing. What is the impact to your business?
Sure.
Because making it a habit with them. But there is a book I'm reading it. Actually, I'm rereading it right now. It says it's how to listen with intention.
Hmm.
And it's about listening to truly listen to people, not listening to check a box. When reps are new, I recommend they have the discovery call score sheet, because to John's book, what you need to measure things that you can improve them, and if you can't measure them, you can't improve. So I have a tracker for everything. But like that,
Yep.
how to listen with intention. Um,
Mhm.
I think it's about people being comfortable in their skin. And I am kind of not a fan of having that discovery call score, like the questions in front of you, because I think that instead of listening to your customer, you're reading the next question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then the problem, of course, is that like so then you gotta the reps gotta have them in their head
Yeah.
fully in some sort of capacity, and then it just becomes this choose your own adventure situation. Yeah, it's tough. I like yes, I kind of go back and forth around it. Where like on the one hand, you'd like them to have it be having. I guess the worst example of this is like when people use slides in a disco conversation, because then they're just like it just
Oh,
leads them to like show up and throw up.
thank
And so
you.
I guess
Yeah.
yeah, and like I think my buddy Corey Bray talks about this all the time. Is like as soon as the slides come out in Disco, like you know that it's going to be a problem. And I guess like a set of questions kind of has a little bit of the same sort of thing where like you're being scripted. But on the flip side, like you don't want the rep to like miss important things, and sometimes they do, especially when you're talking about like 28-year-olds or what have you. Yeah, I guess there's like not really an answer. It's just kind of like a two-edged sword there.
There
Um,
was one discovery call I listened to that had slides in it that I didn't mind, and the reason is the slides had a bunch of quotes from customer pain. Like the
mm,
slide had a quote that said, our release process is broken and we release code too early. And all of them had different, like we have no way to do a canary or pointed launch. And he put it up and the customer, and then he just said, this is what we've heard from other customers. Does any of this resonate with you? And it was like this silence. And as they read them all, and it was so, yep, they're like, that one does. Oh yeah, that's happened to us. And he's like, tell me more. What's the impact to your business? That was the only slide I've ever seen presented during a discovery call that I liked.
Yeah, and I think this is something. So one of our board members, a gentleman named Brett Queener, I think, who used to run sales operations at Salesforce, and he and I were talking about this the other day around how, like, and you guys will probably do this with force management, where at a certain point, what ends up happening is like you harmonize on like the 5 or the the 7 like things that organizations like really care about. I think Force calls them like value drivers or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And like you can just kind of pop them up there, and it's like, cool. So which of these are you? And it actually can do a really good job of like a facility. So like
Right.
they read them all. It's like 1, 3, and 7. It's like wonderful. Now I don't have to take you through all 7 and be like, does this one apply? Does this one apply? Does this one apply? Does this one apply? It's like, cool. You said 1, 3, and 7. Great. Let's talk about the impact of 1. Let's talk about the impact of 3. Let's talk about the impact of 7. Actually, one thing that we've done is we actually do a pre-disco email where literally we have those like multiple use cases, like in HR use cases.
That's cool.
Yeah, I forget whose idea it was. I think it was one of my reps, and then the SDR. So the SDRs actually do it. What they do is like ahead of the meeting, or actually it's right after the meeting books. They'll just be like, hey, just to facilitate the conversation, these are the things that we hear from our customers a lot. Like, it's like, how do you which of these things are a priority for you? Tracking the ramp of reps, managing managing your seller, your AEs and your SDRs using goals, pipeline hygiene. It's like a whole list, right? And so what people will do is sometimes they'll come back and they'll be like, oh yeah, like 2 and 6 is really important. So sometimes it'll be like really brief like that, but at least it guides the conversation. And sometimes people will come back with these like paragraphs.
Yeah, and it's really telling, isn't it? We did that not before a discovery call, but we had a really large demo. There was like 100 people on it. And 100 people, you're not going to get any real Q&A and back and forth. But we sent a survey before, and only 10 people like actually responded. But it like 3 of the responses, it pretty much read, "I'm your champion." Like, I'm just gonna let you know right now, I'm your champion. They've used feature flags. They had the use cases. They put a lot of detail in there about how the use cases would be pertinent to their company. And it was just a great best practice.
That is fascinating. Essentially, it's like, because party calls suck, right? And because like no one's going to speak up. There's all you gotta control the hell out of it, etc. But at least in this case, what you're doing is you're like smoking out the people ahead of time. It's almost kind of like giving a lecture in school, right? Where you're just like, it's like, and I know, and I think that Frank might have the issue here.
Right.
Blah, 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 blah. And then everyone's like, oh, okay, Frank. Yeah, Frank's legit. Okay, great. Yeah, got it. That's a really interesting idea. So essentially, it's just like a pre-disco survey associated with, like obviously that was like a mega party call demo thing, but you could totally imagine doing that when you have like, use us as an example. Oftentimes we'll get dragged into these larger deals where there's like 6 sales managers involved who will ostensibly be the user of Atrium, and like you can't do like runtime disco with each of them in the party call because it'll just be like a disaster, right? So you can do it ahead of time with a little bit of like a little bit of asynchronous. That's so fascinating.
Think about how good it made them feel. Like when you send a survey out to each of the 6 managers and ask for their opinion, it make them feel like you're asking for their opinion.
Yeah, that's a really great point. So it's like pre-disco. I'm writing this down, Tammy. I love it. Yeah. I think one thing. So Kathy had a cool question here about, and we were talking about like mechanisms by which to get in front of the economic buyer earlier, but I think like in a situation where the champion is hesitant to get you in front of EB, are there ways to get in front of the economic buyer anyway, or is that almost just like a sign that you have a weak champion and like you need to find another champion, or is it kind of like both?
I think it's kind of both. I think there are ways, like I think we had mentioned earlier, if the customer is looking to go beyond a 2-week POV, well, you have to meet with your executives. I'm sorry, Mr. Customer, I have no control over it. My executives will not sign off unless they meet with your executives to define if there's, a reasonable opportunity to do business together at the end. So I think what reps miss is some reps just will do anything a customer asks. I need this discount. Okay. I need net 60. Okay. And they view their job is to take what their customer needs and go to finance and say, can I have net 60 on there? But they don't say, yeah. I mean, you're not a go-between. Put yourself as a representative of your company. So first thing to do is push back. No, I don't think I can get that done. But by the way, if I have any chance of getting that done, if you could let your executives meet with my executives to give them visibility that this is a real deal, my chances are a lot higher when you make that happen. So sometimes you can be looking for signs of things that you can say it's out of my control, or it would really help if I could get this meeting set up. Then I bet you I can get you what you want.
Right. So essentially, it's like ways of catalyzing or like helping the champion surmount his or her fears or reticency or what have you, is anytime you like hear an ask, you just like grab that ask and then hold it back.
Yep. You want one?
Like, I would love to. If
it were up to me, I'd just do it for you. I can't.
Yeah, but I'm just little me, right? I got this mean boss. Her name's Tammy. She's got this like really cool biker jacket. You just don't mess with her, right?
Throw me on the bus. She won't approve it. Nope, she just won't. I can ask her.
She won't. She's mean sales leader. No, I wish. Yeah, I love it. Well, so Tammy, I think we're kind of up on time here, but as usual, this was like super rad. A bunch of amazing gems. Completely unsurprising for somebody who has been at this for so long. I mean, amazing champion development, EB access, EB persistence, decision criteria development stuff, like all sorts of wonderful things. This is exactly why we do this, right? Because now people are walking away with like all sorts of very, very tactical things to apply in their own kind of upmarket sales motions. I am going to be I'm going to put a reminder on my calendar to touch base with you in a couple quarters to hear how the commercial stuff is going, because that'll be really exciting. That'll be really exciting for you. But yes, thank you very much. And then for everybody else, thanks for joining us. Next week we have Connor Fee, who's the CRO at Shortcut, used to be Clubhouse. So it's going to be we're going to be talking about technical sales, right? Selling to an engineer. Not dissimilar to LaunchDarkly. In Shortcut's case, it's a down market sale. It's a PLG product, so like product led. A lot of that. Connor used to be the CRO at Clearbit as well, so it'll be absolutely fantastic. So Tammy, thank you very much. Have a absolutely fantastic time in Cabo, and have a good weekend. Okay.
You too. Take care. Good to see you.
Yep. Bye.